The 2022 United Nations Conference on Climate Change is currently underway in Egypt. Kukpi7 Judy Wilson with the Union of BC Indian Chiefs spoke with our Dennis Ward about the conference.
Kukpi, thanks so much for joining us from Egypt. Indigenous delegations have traveled to these climate summits before. What makes this conference different, and how are Indigenous voices being heard?
Well, at COP27, it's the largest Indigenous delegation for quite some time. So in the Indigenous Peoples Caucus that we had the first 2 days of the 2 weeks, we worked together, networked, and came up with an Indigenous Peoples statement in regards to what we'd like to see in regards to the outcome. And a big part of our work has been to retain what was achieved in the Glasgow COP26. So a lot of the references to Indigenous people's rights, and also including us in the mechanisms and the processes, like in 6.4 for loss and damage or adaptation. All of those are really important. And I was representing Kluane, Regional Chief Kluane Adamak. She is the chair for our Assembly of First Nations Climate Action and Environment Advisory Council. So we've been working for many years on these issues, and she's been at the forefront of a lot of these international and national climate change, climate crisis issues. So we had a delegation that came here, included Lorraine Nitro from the Old Crow, Yukon, and the Arctic Canada, and also our youth representative, Taylor Bain Suzuzo. I'm not saying her name right. It's kind of hard name to say. But, you know, so then there's lots of youth that came from all around the world to this COP27, and we've been working very hard on getting our voices heard, but also changing the narrative that we're just victims of climate crisis, that we're actually the climate leaders today, because many of our Indigenous nations, as you know, have been doing climate work for even before the word was coined. So they've been working as land defenders and water protectors for many years.
Kukpi, no doubt you know there have been some high-profile boycotts of this year's event over Egypt's human rights record. What made you decide to make the trip?
Well, it was a hard decision because it's so far away from home, for one thing, and you know we've got a lot of crises in our own community, day to day, and in our nation. It's key and critical. We do have to have some outcomes here at COP27, and we need to work with our Indigenous brothers and sisters around the world on the solutions, because our Indigenous knowledge is so important in the climate crisis. And in BC, Minister Galbo, he categorized it as the epicenter, or the main area. We've been having everything you could think of in climate crisis. So, you know, it's driven the point home. We all need to do something about the climate crisis, and there needs to be more than just, you know, mechanisms, more than just these solutions they call nature-based, for example. You know, it removes us from, you know, Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous people's rights when they call nature-based solutions. So we're over here explaining and debunking a lot of those, you know, false solutions, but explaining how, as Indigenous people, we need to be key front and center. Self-determination, our Indigenous people's rights, and free, prior, informed consent is really important, and the recognition of our rights in these issues. So that's what we've been doing here, and we've had a great AFN delegation, but we've had we're networking with the you know, the different nations around the world, including our brothers and sisters and relatives from south of the border, the medicine line as well. So it's been really a lot of meetings, a lot of sessions, and a lot of plenaries. Canada had its first pavilion, so we had Indigenous leaders, climate leaders session there today. The youth had their climate session as well, and we've been advocating for a lot of the youth to be more front and center in these issues as well. And I think explaining a lot of the root causes are the imbalance in the world, the imbalances of, extractivism versus, leaving the tar sand and the fossil fuels in the ground, for example, and looking at reconnection, if you will, to the way we should be living, connecting with Mother Earth and the water and all of our creation. So those are the kind of messages that we've been having in these different plenaries, and we are getting the ear of government in our own country, but also the ear of other nations around the world.
Kukpi Wilson, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks for taking some time for us, and safe travels.
Thank you.